Our perception of reality is determined by our five senses. What do you hear? What do you see? How do you view the world? But what happens when your senses are manipulated? Is it real? How does this impact your mind? Mental illness first starts in the psyche, it develops, then overtakes your body, becoming physical and tangible. Bora Chung's The Head utilizes psychological horror as a means to demonstrate the effect that mental health has on the body and mind. And this game is a reflection of it. This game is based on the short story The Head by Bora Chung. It can be summarized as follows. The player starts as an average Korean woman, working, going to the bathroom, eating, and taking care of her family. It's a simple, repetitive schedule. Eventually, the player comes across a creature in the toilet, and from then on, things start to change. The environment around the player begins to darken. Dirty walls, dark halls, something is clearly wrong. But with this change, there is one constant: the head. From here, there's a sudden change in tone. No longer is the player simply following a schedule, but all of a sudden, you're in a horror game. And every toilet that the player sees is the creature. It haunts them there every step. As the game progresses, the changes around the player become more and more disgusting. Blood flowing on the ground, hair growing from the cracks in the wall, feces on every surface. One time in the game, when the player asks her husband and family about the head, they only reply, "It's not doing anything bad, is it? Leave it alone." Near the end of the game, the woman enters the bathroom one last time and she meets the head. The head pops out of the toilet and all of a sudden she's facing and fighting the monster. The player fights the head, but fails in the end and is quite literally consumed by it, being dragged into the toilet. The finale is now from the point of view of her daughter, looking on at her mother crying on the bathroom floor. The world seems perfectly fine, nothing is broken, no hair, no blood, only the woman on the floor. Throughout the game, the environment reflects the emotional state of the player's character. As the environment becomes more decrepit, the character's well-being deteriorates, as shown with her image icons. The visual elements of the game indicate that the way that the woman views her surroundings is dependent on her own mental state. The deterioration affects how she views the world around her. To her, it is a disgusting reality. This can be further proved by how no one else around her takes note of their surroundings, almost as if they can't see it, cementing this idea of a perceived reality. This entire situation is a metaphor for mental illnesses, how they are invisible from the outside, but are capable of changing the way that individuals see and interact with the world around them. To add on to this idea of mental health, the treatment of the creature during the initial half of the game is similar to how mental health is treated by society. When the woman goes to her family to talk about the creature, her concerns are ignored. The reaction to her worries parallels how society is ignorant towards this topic. It's ignored. Though the treatment of mental health has improved in recent years, the stigma surrounding the topic is still prevalent in society, especially with older generations. If we were to consider that the head is a symbol of mental health, rather than it being similar to its treatment, then we as the player can start to understand the underlying issues with the role of mental health in society. This idea is also shown in the story that inspired the game. In the short story, the head creature thing's existence is accepted by everyone in the woman's family, but nonetheless, they don't see how the creature is bad for the woman's own mentality. Continuing on with the idea that the creature head thing is a symbol for mental health, we can deduce that the woman's treatment towards it during the beginning of the game, and in the inspiration for it, her ignoring its existence and turning away at its presence, is an example of how individuals ignore their own mental health for the sake of normality. Taking the first step towards helping yourself is difficult, especially if you already think so negatively about the world, much like the woman does. Paired with the reactions of the woman's loved ones, the situation is ironic. It becomes ironic, not to mention that the choice to use something so disgusting and vile as a means to identify the flaws surrounding the treatment of of mental well-being very well indicates that everyone is capable of these actions. It's no longer something that you hear or learn about in the news, but something that you, as the player, actively feels while playing. You become a part of the problem. Every person that you meet and know is suffering from something, invisible to the eye but still as real as a broken bone. But what does this mean in terms of the body? The psychological horror and the design choices are all ways to indicate the trouble lying within the psyche, but how does the game comment on the physical effects? To do this, we need to turn to the ending. The first section of the ending, the creature consuming the woman, indicates how people's aspirations and free will can be taken away. The problems the woman faces, the head and its effect on her mind in the end metaphorically and quite literally consume her, leaving her in tears on the bathroom floor, not even caring for the fact that her daughter is there watching. While the story depicts the woman being replaced by the now beautiful head creature, it too can fit into this point. This is an example of how a person's life can be replaced by something else, their free will controlled by another or another thing. When you're consumed by your plights, it takes over slowly, growing like mold on walls, slowly stripping away the dreams a person may have, leaving nothing as you are slowly consumed by it. A person loses their sense of responsibility. They stop caring about themselves, about others, instead they drown in their own despair. This leaves a physical and visual mark on the person, whether it be from no longer taking care of one's body, not eating, not doing anything, or the damage this can cause on others, such as neglect from losing their sense of responsibility. For some, in the social model of disability, mental illness and disabilities are defined by society. They are not the result of the individual, but rather society's inability to provide for them properly. While this does hold true for physical disabilities, the inability to walk, having lost a limb, having lost sight, a society has built its foundations based on assumptions that the majority can do these things. It does not entirely hold true for mental illnesses. Society defines mental illness, what is normal and what isn't. The ability to define mental illnesses doesn't mean that the definition equals what it is trying to describe. For instance, if there is no society, no definition of disability, it technically would not exist. In this case, it may be true, but not having a definition for mental illness does not mean that the suffering that people go through isn't real. Not having a word associated with a feeling does not make that feeling invalid. The society depicted in the short story and game to a certain degree defines mental illness as something irrelevant and to ignore. How the society treats this issue despite it being real shows how this model falls short. Though society has defined the word, the meaning behind its definition is not reflective of what it truly is. In addition, mental illnesses like depression can occur for no reason at all. It could be because of something, like stress of a job or having lost a loved one, but for the most part, there is no reason. It just happens. It's a monster that appears from out of nowhere. And like in The Head, a toilet. In the end, the game is a commentary on the treatment of mental health in our society, not entirely by institutions, but also by individuals towards themselves. Though we as a society understand the implications of mental health, how serious it is, accepting and facing it is another problem of its own. Ironic as it is for a monster that you ignore and shove away to become who you are, the main focus should now be on how you decide to face this. Will you lock it away and ignore its existence, or will you face it and take control? This is not some game that you can actually play. It's not available to download, it's not even supposed to have a proper game file. 'Cause after all, this game is real. You don't need a piece of data to tell a story like this one. This is a problem founded within society and within reality. A game will never be enough to properly demonstrate the issue. Thank you for watching.